Horror story. The school bus rattled along the empty highway, the once vibrant chatter of the teenagers dying down as the sky deepened into an ominous shade of purple. The day at the zoo had been fun, but now, under the gathering darkness, something felt wrong. The warm hues of the setting sun gave way to the cool, cold creep of the night, and the kids, exhausted from the day, slowly succumbed to a quiet that was heavy and strange. Out of the corner of his eye, Mr. Carter, the bus driver, noticed something odd on the road. The highway that had been smooth and uneventful earlier now seemed disturbed. The yellow lines marking the road were blurred, smeared almost like they had been painted over in haste. And then he saw it. The first red blotch. Small at first, like a splash of paint, but unmistakably crimson. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel as he glanced at it in his side mirror. Had he imagined it? For a moment, Mr. Carter considered saying something, but what was there to say? The kids were finally quiet, their eyes drooping, heads resting against the windows. No, better not to alarm anyone. It was probably nothing, just something on the road. But his eyes flicked back to the pavement. More red spots. Larger now. They dotted the asphalt, leading forward in irregular intervals like breadcrumbs scattered in haste. He felt a chill roll down his spine, one that settled deep in his bones. Something wasn't right. The bus lurched slightly as he slowed down, his gaze scanning the road ahead. The darkening sky made it hard to see clearly, but he could swear. Yes, there was debris now, scattered across the highway. Pieces of something. He couldn't tell what. Shattered wood, bits of fabric, and was that fur? Mr. Carter's breath hitched, his pulse quickening. His foot hovered over the brake, instinct screaming at him to stop, to turn around. But they were in the middle of nowhere. No exits, no lights. Just the long stretch of road and the gathering shadows. From the back of the bus, someone shifted in their seat. He could hear it, the soft murmur of one of the kids waking up, followed by the quiet whisper of another voice. The silence wasn't so peaceful anymore, it was thick, like a pressure building in the air. The bus continued to roll forward, though slower now. Much slower. Another splotch of red appeared in the headlights, smeared across the cracked surface of the road, and for the first time he saw what it truly was: blood. A lot of blood. His heart thudded in his chest as the realization hit him. Something had happened here. Something bad. Mr. Carter swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as he pressed the pedal, determined to keep the bus moving. But with each passing minute, the debris worsened. The fur, he was sure now, was clumped in strange patches, and then the glint of something metallic caught his eye. A twisted, broken shape up ahead, tangled in the debris. The bus thudded as it ran over something thick. He felt it beneath the wheels, the dull shock of it reverberating through the frame of the bus. He gripped the wheel tighter, his jaw clenched, forcing himself not to look back, not to let the kid see the fear creeping into his face. The road was no longer familiar. The straight highway had twisted, narrowed even, as if it was guiding them somewhere. A murmur of unease rippled through the bus. A few kids were stirring now, sensing the change, their sleepy eyes flicking toward the windows. The silence was no longer comforting, it was suffocating. Mr. Carter's heart pounded in his chest as he glanced up at the rearview mirror. He could see their eyes, wide with confusion, darting to him for reassurance he couldn't provide. He had to keep them calm. He had to keep himself calm. But then, just ahead, looming in the headlights, a figure appeared at the edge of the road, standing motionless, watching as the bus approached. Mr. Carter's blood ran cold. And the bus kept going. The figure loomed at the edge of the road, barely illuminated by the bus's headlights. It was hard to make out at first, just a shadow in the distance, but as the bus crept closer, it became clear that whoever, or whatever, it was, stood completely still. Mr. Carter's hands trembled on the wheel, a sense of dread wrapping around him like cold fingers. He kept his foot hovering over the brake but didn't dare slam it down, not with the kids in the back. They were all waking up now, voices low and confused, their faces pressed against the glass, peering into the thick darkness. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, facing the bus as though it had been waiting for them. Just as the bus drew within 20 feet, the figure turned. Slowly. Its movement was unnatural, almost as if it were being pulled by invisible strings, and then it was gone. It didn't run. It didn't vanish. It just seemed to step away from the light, swallowed by the darkness as if the road had simply consumed it. A collective gasp rose from the kids in the back. Mr. Carter blinked, his grip tightening on the wheel. His heart was thundering now, loud in his ears. That chill from earlier? It was worse now. It was suffocating. He pressed the gas again, determined to put distance between the bus and whatever that thing had been. The engine roared to life, but just as the bus began to pick up speed, The bus lurched violently to one side, then the other as all four wheels locked up at once. The squeal of metal against the road sent a shockwave through the vehicle, throwing the kids from their seats. Some of them screamed. The bus groaned as it skidded, finally grinding to a halt at a crooked angle. "Shit," Mr. Carter muttered under his breath, his voice shaking. He looked around wildly, hands gripping the wheel like a lifeline. He flicked a glance at the dashboard, no warning lights. Nothing. The kids were all staring at him now, wide-eyed and terrified. He forced a smile, though his heart pounded in his chest. "All right, everyone stay calm. Just a flat tire or something. I'll be right back. I'll get us moving again in no time." He didn't wait for a response. Didn't even look back. He needed to be out of there, needed air, space, anything to stop the growing sense of suffocation. Mr. Carter opened the bus door with a heavy hiss and climbed down, the chill of the night biting at his skin the second his feet hit the ground. The road was silent. The night was thick and unnaturally quiet. No wind, no insects, not even the faint hum of distant cars. Just silence. Mr. Carter crouched down to check the wheels, his fingers shaking as he reached out to touch the rubber. It was shredded, like something had torn into it with claws. His heart skipped a beat as he backed away slowly, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. He couldn't do this. Something was wrong. Something was... Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the side of the road. Mr. Carter jerked his head toward the sound, eyes wide, scanning the blackened highway for any sign of movement. He heard it again, closer this time. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. And then, silence. He straightened up, his legs shaking. He had to get back on the bus, had to. Snap. Something moved in the darkness, just behind him. His breath hitched in his throat, but before he could turn around, crack, something struck him. Art. The world spun around him as he fell, vision blurring, his mouth opening in a silent scream that never escaped his throat. His body hit the pavement with a sickening thud, blood spilling from the back of his skull where it had been split open. His body twitched once, twice, and then went still. The kids inside the bus waited, watching the open door for their driver to return, unaware of the lifeless body lying just feet away in the shadows. A minute passed, then two. The uneasy murmur of the teenagers spread like wildfire. "Where is he?" one of them asked, panic starting to rise. Another one pressed her face to the window, trying to see if Mr. Carter was still outside. But all she saw was darkness. Then, to their relief, the door to the bus swung shut with a sharp clunk. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, climbed up the stairs. The figure of Mr. Carter reappeared in the dim light of the bus, his head lowered, his cap casting a shadow over his face. The bus erupted into nervous chatter as the kids tried to ask what had happened, why he took so long. But the driver said nothing. Not a single word. He simply moved to the driver's seat, his movements stiff and mechanical, and sat down. The engine roared back to life with a deafening growl. The kids noticed it immediately. He didn't seem right. The driver's shoulders were hunched unnaturally, and his hands gripped the wheel tighter than they should have. The way he moved, it was different, more like a puppet than a person. But before anyone could question it, the bus lurched forward, faster than it had before. Much faster. One of the boys in the back, a senior named Derek, leaned into the aisle. "Mr. Carter? Everything all right?" he called out. No response. The bus picked up speed. The kids began to shift in their seats uneasily. "Hey, slow down," another girl shouted, her voice edged with fear. But the driver remained silent, his foot pressed hard on the gas, the engine roaring louder and louder as the speedometer climbed past the legal limit. The bus wasn't just speeding. It was hurtling down the road. The trees outside blurred into streaks, and the wind howled as it whipped against the sides of the vehicle. Panic rippled through the bus as the kids began to shout, their fear rising to a fever pitch. And then, ahead of them, the road ended. A bridge loomed, its guardrails gleaming in the moonlight. It was narrow and steep, and the bus was approaching it far too fast. Far too fast. "Stop. Mr. Carter, stop!" Derek screamed, slamming his hands against the seat in front of him. But the driver didn't stop. Instead, he pressed the accelerator harder, the bus careening toward the bridge at breakneck speed. The wheels screeched against the road as the bus hit the edge of the bridge and launched into the air. The kids screamed, their voices lost in the roar of the wind as the bus soared for a brief, terrifying moment, and then plummeted. The impact came with a bone-crushing crash. Metal twisted and groaned as the bus collided with the ravine below, shattering windows, ripping seats from their hinges. The world turned into a blur of screams, broken glass, and the sickening crunch of bodies slamming into one another. And then, darkness. The next morning, rescue crews arrived at the scene. The bus was a mangled wreck at the bottom of the ravine, pieces of it scattered across the jagged rocks. It had fallen far, crashing into the shallow river below. They found the bodies, twisted, broken, lifeless. Not a single survivor. But as they searched through the wreckage, something strange came to light. Mr. Carter's body wasn't among them. In fact, his body wasn't found at all. Only the twisted, grinning face of a stranger.